Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome back once again to our ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nipishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we are continuing with our mini-series on Stimulation for Ecstatic Love, and this will be part 36. Last Friday we discussed, as you remember, Srimati Radharani's Ornaments, and we will continue with that topic today. So, in the last lecture we discussed in great detail two kinds of shringara, or ornaments, that Srimati Radharani wears. Traditional ornaments of jewels like diamonds, rubies, emeralds, gold, etc. And the other one was flower ornaments. Now, one important thing to understand is that all of these ornaments are not simply decorative items, but are themselves, in and of themselves, pure devotees, fully enlightened souls serving the Lord in that way, in that capacity. Why? Because everything in the spiritual world is a person. Everything is conscious. In his purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 2.9.38, Srila Prabhupada writes, in the spiritual world, everything is full of knowledge, and therefore everything there is personal. Nothing is impersonal. The land, the water, the trees, the mountains, the rivers, the men, the animals, the birds, all are of the same quality, namely Chaitanya. And therefore, everything in the transcendental world is individual and personal. Prabhupada explains it so nicely. And in Vrindavan Days, Memories of an Indian Holy Town, a book by Hayagriva Das, one of Srila Prabhupada's early disciples, Hayagriva says to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, you speak of Vrindavan as a person. And Prabhupada replies, yes, in spiritual consciousness, everything is personal. Even the city of Ravana appeared before Hanuman as a gigantic Rakshasi, and Hanuman knocked her down because she challenged him. An interesting example Prabhupada gave there. Now, Harisuri Das, a famous commentator on Srimad Bhagavatam, says in one of his commentaries on the 10th canto, that once when Mother Yasoda was breastfeeding Krishna, milk that was boiling on the stove became jealous. The milk became jealous and started thinking, oh, what use is my life? Let me commit suicide. So thinking in this way, the milk on the stove started boiling over and flowing towards the fire. So everything's personal, everything's a person in Goloka Vrindavan. In this regard, there is one fully conscious ornament of Sri Radha that is especially imbued with devotion. And what is that? Radharani's anklets, her ankle bells. Shivaram Swami, my dear godbrother, shares the realizations of one acharya in his commentaries on Raghunath Das Goswami's Vilap Kusmanjali, that when Srimati Radharani walks on the path leading to Nandagram, on the way to see Krishna, her anklets surge with the excitement of her imminent meeting with Krishna. When she returns back to Yavat, she's feeling some separation, so those anklets sing her songs of consolation. And when she is dancing with Krishna, those anklets are most joyful. But when she is restrained from seeing Krishna by her in-laws, those ankle bells become overwhelmed with sorrow. It's also described that when she is stealing out of the house at night to meet Krishna, Sri Radha stifles the sound of her anklets by covering them with a cloth so they can't sing and give her away. And then they become disappointed. And sometimes when they're in her jewelry case and they're taken out and replaced by flower anklets, they become sad. And I was reading, once when one anklet was lost near Sevakunj, it felt neglected until it was found by the gopi Kanaka Manjari. Hare Krishna. So as such, many great devotees, they praise these anklets in their writings. One such praise is expressed by our Rasacharya Rupa Swami in his Lalita Madhava, Sayama Utva 279. He writes, moving through the air in waves of sweetness, the tinkling sound of a certain pair of ankle bells has silenced the cooing of the passionate sarasa birds and filled my heart with a host of ecstasies. Such influence can only be accomplished by Sri Radha's ornaments. And I was reading that Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, he expresses his own desire to hear those very same ankle bells of Srimati Radharani. He expresses that desire in his Radharasa Sudhanidhi, verse 16. He writes so beautifully, when will I behold how graceful Radha shyly gazes at her toes, and then at the full moon face of the king of Rasikas standing at a distance? And when will I hear her anklets tingling as she eagerly runs to meet him? And when will I hear her anklets tingling as she eagerly runs to meet him? Hare Krishna. So now I would like to share one of my favorite anklet pastimes of Radharani. I shared it, I think, 3 years ago in another lecture, but it's so sweet and applicable at this time. And of course, we never tire of hearing nectarian topics of Radha and Krishna. Vayam tuna vichipyama uttama shloka vikrame yatstrin vatam rasagyanam svadu svadu pade pade. You often hear devotees, svadu svadu pade, but keep speaking. So what is the translation? We never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who enjoy association with him relish hearing his pastimes at every moment. That's Bhagavatam 1:119. So this pastime that I want to share with you, it's recounted in Rajashekar Das Brahmachari's Braj Mandala Parikrama book, one of the first Parikrama books, some years ago. That once upon a time, on one fine spring day, it's described in Sri Vrindavan Dham, Radha and Krishna made a plan to meet at Sarabhikund. Now, to avoid attracting attention, the plan was that Krishna would come alone from the south, and Radha, with one maidservant, would come from the north to meet at Sarabhikund. Now, according to the Acharyas, when Krishna arrived at the appointed time, Radhika was not there. So he thought, never mind, ladies are sometimes late. But as time went on, it turned out that Sri Radha was very late, very late. And at first Krishna was a little impatient, but as time went by, he became concerned actually for Radharani's safety. For a rumor was spreading around that Kamsa had heard of Radharani's breathtaking beauty and had been making plans to kidnap her and take her to Mathura. So our hero, Krishna, thought, I cannot wait any longer. I must look for Radha. And so he set out in the northern direction. However, Radharani was not late because of Kamsa or any danger. Rather, she had taken a detour through the subforest of Vilasavan. Why? To collect some flowers for Krishna. And while doing so, she had lost one of her ankle bells. And after searching everywhere in Vilasvan, she said to her companion, her friend, I'm sure I lost it somewhere here amongst these trees, but where I do not know. She said like that, where I do not know. Now, Radharani is a princess, and she has many ankle bells at her home in Varshana, and she wouldn't ordinarily, feel the loss of one of them. But she was particularly fond of this ankle bell, because Krishna had given it to her at a very special moment. It was a delicate golden chain with studded jewels and little tiny golden bells hanging from it. So she was determined to find that anklet. So at one point, she called to it by name. She called out by name. Ratna Gopura, oh Ratna Gopura, where are you? Just see. Because everything in the spiritual world is personal, so she's calling out to her ankle bells. Ratna Gopura, where are you? But she heard no reply. So just at that moment, of course by Purnamasi's arrangement, Krishna happened to be walking by Vilas Van, and he heard a woman's voice coming from the forest. Ratna Gopura, where are you? And of course, he recognized it as Radharani's voice. So he turned and he ran into the forest, where he found Sri Radha and her girlfriend intensely searching the woods. It's described with their eyes fixed on the ground. They're just looking at the ground. In fact, Radharani was so absorbed in her search that she didn't notice Krishna until she came upon, what? His two bluish lotus feet. She's down there, she comes across his two bluish lotus feet. So at that point, she looked up and she said happily, oh Shyam, I'm so happy you've come. So Krishna said, well, Radharani, what are you looking for? She answered, I've lost my favorite ankle bells, the ones that you gave me, and I'm determined to find them. So then Krishna, he looked left, and he looked right, and he looked back at Radha, and he said, it doesn't seem to be here, so let's go now to Surabhi Kund, as we planned. Later, we'll have another anklet made to replace this lost one. But Radharani replied, absolutely not, Krishna. I will not leave my dear anklet alone in these woods. Therein we see again, she's addressing it very personally. As a person, I'm not going to leave my dear anklet alone in these woods. So Krishna tried again, saying, but Radha, let's just look for it another time. But when Radharani frowned, she's Man, Krishna immediately surrendered. And he said, okay, I'll help you find it. So he took Radha's hand, and side by side they searched the forest floor. They looked in the dust, in the grass, under bushes, around the roots of trees, but with no success. They simply couldn't find it. So Radharani let go of Krishna's hand and pointing said, you look in the flower garden over by the side of that lake. It's called Vilas Kund. And I'll look here with my maidservant. We'll search one more time on this path. But Krishna was getting impatient. He wanted to bring this, how can you say, lost ankle bell saga to a conclusion. So while he was searching in the flower garden at Vilas Kund, he came upon a beautiful desire vine that had different colored flowers. It was extremely aromatic. Now we've heard of desire trees, but a desire vine? Wow. I think just like you can pray to a desire tree, you can pray to a desire vine because it's also fully conscious. It's a person. Vrindavan's so amazing. So Krishna cut off a piece of the vine and made it into a flower anklet because it was covered by flowers. So he made it into a flower anklet. Then he called out, hey Radhe, look at this. And he ran over to where Radharani was and he tied it on her ankle. He thought, well, that's it, now we can go. But when Radharani looked down expecting to see her favorite anklet, all she saw was it's described, a floral substitute. And she was completely unimpressed. So at this point she chastised Krishna, saying, Krishna, why did you look for my precious jewelry instead of playing with flowers? So Krishna went back to the lake to keep looking for that precious anklet. And he thought, Radharani is so absorbed in this anklet, the entire day is going to be lost. I have to think of a better plan. So of course, Purnamasi had arranged all this, so Krishna knew what to do. He took his flute from his belt, his vamsi, and he dug the ground with it. Sometimes he digs the ground to bring water forth for his thirsty cowherd boys. This time he dug the ground with his flute, and as he did so, he prayed. Krishna prayed, Dear Mother Earth, please return my beloved's lost ankle bells at once. And amazingly, or maybe not so amazingly, as Krishna said this, the hole he had dug with his flute became filled with ankle bell bracelets, some of which were identical to the one that Radharani had lost, but other ankle bracelets were even more beautiful and more opulent. So Krishna called out again, Radhe, Radhe, look, I found it. Radharani, it's over here. So immediately, Radharani and her close friend, they rushed over to where Krishna was kneeling. And when they looked at the ground, their mouths dropped open. One Acharya very nicely describes the scene. As a greedy king would revel in his treasure chest of royal jewels, Krishna was running his fingers through heaps of ankle bells in the ground, each one more dazzling and ornate than the one before. So at this point, Radharani was speechless. And so Krishna, not willing to take any risks, dropped all the anklets in his hands and picked out one that perfectly matched Radharani's lost ankle bracelet. Then he said loudly, "Here it is, I found it." So Radha took the ankle bell from Krishna's hand as she asked, "Krishna, where did all the other ones come from?" So this is so nice part in the pastime. Krishna smiled and he replied, "Radharani, by the constant touch of your lotus foot, the lost anklet became a Chintamani gem that transformed the earth it touched into many millions of ankle bells." Then he said in a joking way, "Dearest, if you don't put it on at once, then the whole of Vrindavan will be paved with ankle bells." So Sri Radha, she smiled for the first time that day and gracefully put her lotus foot forward and said, "Krishna, then you had better secure it on my foot yourself so it doesn't fall off again." So Krishna took the anklet from Radharani's hand and carefully fastened it around her ankle. It's described taking as much time as he possibly could. Now, some Vaishnavas say that many anklets with tiny golden bells can still be found on the banks of Vilas Sarovar in the forest of Vilasvan. So let's go. But they also say such anklets can only be found by those who have unflinching and deep faith in the divine couple. And how to achieve that faith and love? The sadhus say, it's so beautiful, all things lost are easily found in Vilasvan. There, even souls who have lost their eternal identities as servants of Krishna can find them by the grace of this forest and the holy name. So beautiful. This is one reason, of course, Srila Prabhupada constructed the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And in a purport in Srimad Bhagavatam, he's inviting all his followers, or anyone, to come there to spend some time or to live in Vrindavan, because one can become Krishna conscious just by the grace of the Vrindavan forest itself. And a double effect will be, if you're there and you're chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So either one or both, but both is best. But if we can't live in Vrindavan, we can meditate on Vrindavan from afar, and wherever we are in the world, chant the holy names. And one day, by Prabhupada's grace, we may live in Goloka Vrindavan, in the spiritual world. So that pastime happened, of course, 5,000 years ago. But of course, we know it is still happening in Vrindavan today. All the Krishna's pastimes are eternal. They're repeated again and again and again in Sri Vrindavan Dham, but always ever fresh. So we know it's still happening in Vrindavan today, but we don't have the eyes to see it. And how to achieve what is required spiritual eyes? By mercy only. I was thinking that in the Bible, in Matthew 6:17, Jesus is speaking. He says, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." And as our Lord Krishna says to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 11:8, "But you cannot see me with your present eyes, Arjuna, therefore I give you divine eyes. Behold my mystic opulence." But even though we may not have yet been granted spiritual vision, we should accept all these pastimes as real, as true, and they're still going on, based on the authority of Guru and Gauranga. There's that famous verse from Svetasvatara Upanishad, I think it's 623. Yasya Devi Para Bhaktir Yatta Devi Tata Guru Tasyate Kaita Yarta Pakashtante Mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. And I'll quote the Bible again, John 20:29. Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, Thomas, you have believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Again, Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, Thomas, you have believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." So our good fortune is that we're being trained up by someone who sees Krishna face to face, Srila Prabhupada. After Srila Prabhupada gave Srimad Bhagavatam class in Hyderabad, India, on April 15, 1975, he asked for questions. I read this recently. So one man raised his hand and asked, "Swamiji, do you ever feel Krishna's presence, or have you seen him?" So Prabhupada emphatically said, "Yes, I feel his presence and I have seen him. You can too." And then Prabhupada said, "Premanjani Churati Bhakti Vilochanena," that famous verse. Prabhupada went on, "This is the formula for seeing Krishna. If you have developed your love of Krishna, then you'll see him 24 hours a day. Just like if you love somebody, you'll always think of them, and the love will come. That is natural." So the first qualification is whether you have developed that love for Krishna. Then Prabhupada said, you'll see him 24 hours a day. Hare Krishna. So that's all for today, Prabhus. I'm still in the Baltic Sea coast here in Poland, and we're in a new town today, and the devotees went out 45 minutes ago to go on Harinam, and I want to catch up with them. And invite people to our festival, I always call it the wonderful world of Hare Krishna, so they can begin their spiritual journey. And one day they can also hear these sweet pastimes of the Lord as a stimulation for ecstatic love that's there deep within our hearts. And we can take them back home, back to Godhead as well. Now we'll have one more lecture on Radharani's ornaments next week. 3 lectures on Radharani's ornaments. But for now, let us finish with the following verses by Sri Rupa Goswami from his Stavamala, the part entitled Sri Partana Padhati. Very, very, very beautiful. He writes, "O Radharani, O Queen of Vrindavan, your complexion is like molten gold. Your doe-like eyes are very restless. 1,000,000 full and brilliant moons wane before your lustrous countenance. And a blue sari, having stolen the hue of a fresh, rain-laden cloud, has enwrapped your exquisite form. O Radha, you are the crest jewel of all the dallying damsels of Vrindavan, fragrant and pristine like a budding jasmine flower. Your sublime form is adorned with priceless jewelry, and you are the best of all the charming and intelligent gopis. You are decorated with all wonderful excellences and surrounded by 8 dedicated and beloved cowherd girls, known as the Astasakis. The ambrosia of your beautiful lips, red as the bimbo fruit, is a life-giving syrup to Krishna. O Radhe, I am rolling on the banks of the Jamuna, my poor heart filled with anticipation, praying to you with all humility. I am guilty of being an offender, a rascal, a useless wretch. Yet I beg you to kindly engage me in even the smallest service to your lotus feet. O most merciful lady, it will not become you to ignore this most distressed soul, for your heart is always overflowing with compassion and love. Sri Rupa Goswami Prabhupada ki, Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani ki, her anklets ki, Sri Vrindavan Dham ki, Sri Rupa Prabhupada ki. Thank you. See you next Friday. Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shamba Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Srimati Radharani ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Shyam. Hare Krishna.